My name is Allison Huff McPherson, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Arizona in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. I also have an appointment in the College of Optical Sciences. I graduated with my Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from the University of West Florida and a Master of Education in Instructional Psychology at the University of Oklahoma. And finally, my doctorate of health education from A.T. Still University. And I've had a somewhat non traditional road into academia, having worked at higher education institutions in three different countries. I took time off to raise my kids, and I did a whole lot of traveling in between. So when I moved to Tucson in 2004, I came here as a single mom and a one income home, and so I took the first job that I could get, which was in behavioral health. And of course, I had the psychology background, and it was a nice fit. But that was where my interest for substance use disorder was really peaked. The clients that I worked with, or the patients that I worked with, were really those patients who society scoffs at. They were the homeless, the unshowered, unshaven, the ones who are panhandling on the streets. And I watched those individuals really struggle with their substance use, and I watched them lose their children and lose their homes and their jobs. And I was able to see a different side to them. I met with them and I heard them crying about the loss of their child to CPS or Child Protective Services. And I listened to them tell me how much they wanted to stop using substances and they just couldn't do it. Or I met with family members who knew them before the drugs had taken over, and to hear the stories about what amazing people these individuals were. And again, these were the invisible people to society, the ones that society just kind of looks the other way to. And so when I saw that side of substance use, it really helped me understand that this is truly a brain disease and there's the behavioral component, but it really piqued my interest to try to understand substance use a lot better through the lens of neuroscience and the brain and how substance use fits into the different systems that we operate within. Well, it just really drives home the notion that this is not a choice. And I think that it's so easy to assume that somebody just, even though we know from a logical perspective that you're not, it's not a moral, you're not lacking in morals. We know that, but it's still easy to judge, and we all have our own implicit biases. And it wasn't until I really met with these individuals and they became, I mean, I became close with them as human beings. I got to know them. And we can make that assumption of, oh my gosh, this is the fifth child that this person has lost to CPS. When are they going to learn? When are they going to ever stop? When are they going to put their kids first? But I'm hugging that mom who cannot get sober, but loves her child as much as I love mine. And so there's just two sides to the coin, to see them as humans and to hear their family members talk about how sweet and sensitive and caring and kind they are when the drugs aren't taking over. It's just, it was a whole new world opened up to me that made me really decide, like, this is something that needs to be investigated more from the perspective of somebody who's been involved with the individuals who are struggling, not just from a textbook. A multidisciplinary approach to solving any problem, great or small, is going to be what produces a more comprehensive solution. So I think that bringing diverse perspectives into the research process, it ensures that when we're solving some of the world's most complicated, challenging problems, that we're not doing it in a silo. And I think as researchers, we do have our areas of expertise, and we do tend to get ourselves into a silo and look at things through our own lens. And so having the ability and the Howard Brain Science Foundation's core mission of bringing people together from a multidisciplinary background is exactly what we need to solve these multifactorial problems. So in my area of research, substance use and misuse, there are so many moving parts that impact various layers of the disorder. And the disorder operates within multiple systems. And so some of those systems our inter and interpersonal relationships, social determinants of health, even the healthcare payer systems. We have behavioral health, medical health, neuroscience, and even state and federal policies. And so, if we don't have a multidisciplinary approach to resolving or treating substance use disorder and relapse, then we're not taking into account not just the systems that are at play that contribute to the disorder, but the systems that are in play in order to apply any solutions that we are able to come up with. And so, again, if a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach isn't taken, we just end up looking at things through a very individualistic perspective. And we like to hyper focus on things that we're good at. And so I think that working within the space of multidisciplinary it forces us to be open to alternatives. And it really is what's going to lead us to be able to resolve and find solutions to global problems and problems that operate within multi systems. There's a few projects that I've been working on recently. As I mentioned previously, I also have an appointment in the College of Optical Sciences, and I am part of a team of researchers and engineers who were recently awarded a 10-year, $50 million grant from the National Science Foundation. And that is to create an engineering research center called the Center for Quantum Networks. So the University of Arizona is the lead on that particular center, and our core partners are Harvard University, MIT, and Yale. And so the center itself aims to lay the foundations of the quantum internet. And as part of the National Science Foundation, we also have a mandate to not only develop the technology that will allow us to develop the quantum internet, but also to drive convergent outcomes across science, law, policies, society, economics, and all of that within a very strong culture of inclusion. And so that's where I come in. I am the engineering workforce development director for this center. And again, we have our core partners, Harvard, MIT, and Yale, but we also have additional partners across the nation and internationally. So we work within a distributed system of 10 university partners. And as such, I work with community, industry, academic, and education partners to ensure that the needs and the demands of this nascent workforce of quantum information science and engineering are met. And so my job within that realm is to ensure that this pipeline, if you will, of those that we recruit into the quantum information science engineering pipeline is filled, but also that we provide the supports and develop programs for when they are recruited into either undergraduate or graduate programs, that they have the supports needed to succeed and to be able to graduate and move on into either industry or academia in this particular area. So within that, I do a lot with underrepresented minorities. I work a lot with our indigenous populations, particularly in Arizona. The University of Arizona is a land grant institution. And as such, we have a responsibility to give back to our community. But in addition to that, we actually sit on the sacred lands of the Tohono O'odham and the Pasco Yaqui tribes. And so we have an even larger responsibility to make sure that we're serving those community members. And I do a lot with those tribal nations to ensure that we are building capacity, we are building relationships, and that we can represent the students appropriately when they come into the institution, so that we can ensure that not only are they able to succeed, but that when they do graduate, that they're able to give back to their own communities. And so I run several undergraduate research programs, REUs, and some RETs, which are research experience for teachers. And for example, this summer, I have about 50 to 60 students who are all coming in from different universities for the summer to work with faculty in STEM labs. And they will spend 10 weeks with us. And they're placed all around, not just at the University of Arizona, but around our network within the Center for Quantum Networks. And so that's one of the main things I do with the College of Optical Sciences, is run their engineering workforce development program, make sure that we provide programs and training for students at all levels of that pipeline, pre-college, university, graduate school, and into early career and beyond. Other projects that I'm working on involve, for example, I'm working on a study that is investigating the development of an adjunctive behavioral treatment for opioid use disorder, particularly during the postpartum period for moms. That's a very risky time for relapse after a mom who's been in treatment has a baby. And so we're looking for alternative treatments, including MAT. But beyond that, what are some of the behavioral things that we can do to assist moms? I also am investigating the impact of COVID-19 stress on treatment seeking and relapse prevention for the management of substance use disorder. So I'm a fellow with the Howard Brain Science Foundation, and I came to learn about the foundation through some colleagues. And I have been able to work collaboratively on some studies that involve, as we go back to the multidisciplinary approach, it involves engineers and scientists from different backgrounds, and it's been really exciting. I I really think that the mission of bringing scientists and engineers from different backgrounds together is so amazing with the Howard Brain Science Foundation. It's something that I've not really seen. I mean, we all know about multidisciplinary research and interdisciplinary and convergent. I mean, all those words are really important, but to see this in action, to see a foundation that really strives to ensure that there are people not just from different backgrounds but from different parts of the world, I think has been, it's a game changer. And so I've been affiliated for a little over a year with the Howard Brain Science Foundation, and it's been amazing. I think neuromodulation is an evolving technology, and we've come a long way in learning more about its therapeutic efficacy, especially as it relates to neurodegenerative diseases, pain management, mental health and addiction, PTSD. It's really got a lot of promise in those areas. And I think one of the great things about neuromodulation is that it provides a benefit to both the patient and the provider. And the identification of specific biomarkers has really allowed neuromodulation to become much more precise. And as the technology and the science around neuromodulation expands, I think that it's the applications of it are limitless. I think there's a lot of room for neuromodulation in addiction treatment and relapse prevention. The neural pathways that are developed during drug use, they create very strong associations, which are often at the helm of the cycle of substance use and relapse. And we currently are sitting at a relapse rate of about 40 to 60%, which is very high. And it's consistent with chronic illnesses, but it's something that it's a huge cost to society. It's a huge cost to families, both monetarily, fiscally, as well as emotionally. And so when we look at studies utilizing neuromodulation that show promise with, for example, cocaine or nicotine or alcohol dependence, I think that that's really important to continue to go down that road. For example, there was a study where using neuromodulation or modulation of the anterior cingulate cortex has shown to decrease a smoker's craving for nicotine. So if we can apply neuromodulation in the most uninvasive way that can control or help us even to better understand addiction, I think that's the way to go. I mean, there's still a long way to go in this area, but using EEG neurofeedback or real-time functional MRIs, deep brain stimulation, all of these types of neuromodulation, and applying that to the field of mental health and addiction, I think is in an effort to either reduce the need for or reduce the dosage of pharmacologic treatment modalities, I think is extremely promising. And when we look at the ability to develop and measure certain objective parameters that reflect the neural mechanisms of addiction, um, we're moving toward identifying the biomarkers that lead to relapse. And I think that that is going to be um, a really big change agent in addiction treatment and management. And some of the risks, I think, probably just looking at it through the lens of addiction isn't just a brain disorder or a brain disease. It's a disorder within other systems, some of which we can control and others which we can't. So while I think neuromodulation has a very promising place in the treatment of addiction disorders, it should be viewed as part of a comprehensive treatment plan rather than the sole treatment plan. If we are just using neuromodulation, even if it shows efficacy in reducing the cravings or the actual use of substances, that's only one part of the problem because of the other systems that are at play. We're looking at environments that that individual will go back into that may or may not serve as triggers, and we're looking at behavioral health or other mental health comorbidities that go along with addiction and substance use disorder. And so those have to be handled from a more behavioral standpoint. And I think that leveraging neuromodulation to solve one part of the addiction problem is so important. And again, it's got huge promise, and I think that it's got promise that goes beyond our imagination, because if we can reduce some of the pharmacologic treatment modalities for addiction, and right now the gold standard for heroin is MAT, and so we're using methadone and buprenorphine. And while those are amazing in and of themselves to be able to reduce cravings, they have their own side effects, and those side effects can be troublesome and problematic in both the short term and the long term. So I think finding a way to be able to reduce the need for those types of treatments is, as I mentioned before, it's going to be a change agent. But because substance use disorder um, operates within multi systems, we're going to have to address all of those systems kind of simultaneously, because um, what I've seen happen is we tend to, if we have a sinking ship, we're kind of plugging the holes in that ship one by one. And so going back to the idea of a multidisciplinary approach and bringing people with different expertise together, this is exactly why it's necessary, because we need an approach that kind of plugs all of those leaks simultaneously so that we can keep the ship afloat. The more we can understand the neuroscience of the brain, the more we're going to find unconventional ways to treat and manage mental health and address certain mental illnesses that, as I mentioned before, that will reduce either the dosage of or the reliance upon pharmacologic treatment modalities. And so, while neuromodulation has so much promise in this area, I mean, mental health, addiction, PTSD, they all involve the brain and mechanisms within the brain. But to be a little bit cautionary, I think that, after as much time and as many experts we have that are learning about and studying the brain, we still struggle to fully understand the brain. And even more perplexing is understanding the mind. And I don't think the brain and the mind are necessarily the same thing. And so I have a feeling that no matter how advanced our understanding of the brain becomes, we're always going to struggle to understand the mind. And in my professional opinion, mental health falls somewhere in between the brain and the mind. And as I have mentioned before, those systems that are at play for somebody who has challenges with mental health, well, all of us have mental health, and those systems are at play for all of us. And so we can work with the brain, we can apply the neuromodulation, as we talked about before, to treat some of the aspects that involve the brain, but the mind is what is going to be out there operating within these other systems. And so I think that, kind of similar to what I said with addiction, that while I think that the application of neuroscience in treating and managing mental health and addiction is 100% necessary, I don't believe that it's going to be 100% of the solution. What I like to say is our mind is a labyrinth, and there's no one straight answer to what's going on in there. And so no matter, even if we can get to the point where we can map it out and we can identify all the neural pathways and the the electrical currents, all of that, we still don't understand the mind and that whole idea of consciousness and subconscious. And it's just, it's a fascinating field. And part of the fascination is that we just don't fully understand it. The Howard Brain Science Foundation is already doing a lot to move the needle in treatments for and management of disorders and diseases of the brain. And I think that that work is absolutely invaluable. Um, Bringing together the researchers and experts from various disciplines and areas of expertise from across the country is one of the reasons I think that it's able to do the work that it does. And so it really speaks to the value placed on multidisciplinary and convergent research efforts. And so I think that by continuing to do that and continuing to grow this network, and in addition to that, providing opportunities to network and collaborate among the scientists and researchers that are involved in Howard Brain Science Foundation is essential. And so I'm very appreciative for the opportunities provided by this network.